Brandon Thurston from WrestleNomics is up next, and we're going to follow Brandon with John Pollock from Post Wrestling.
Delivering on the returns, increasing our margins.
Ratings go down the toilet if I'm not here.
All I do is simply put the math in my favor.
We agree that Brandon and John do good work.
The reason is simple wrestling economics.
I've been told the Netflix numbers. I've been told the metrics a little bit, probably 5 different times. I still don't get it.
There were respectable wrestling journalists who needed answers.
Thank you very much, members of the media. I hope you all go to hell.
How about we pop a number right here, right now? Whole part of the show, man.
And welcome, everybody, to the post-WrestleMania edition of Pollock and Thurston. It is John Pollock and Brandon Thurston coming at you with a loaded edition of the show. We have WrestleMania to discuss. We have testimonies to parse. We have audio from a classroom speech at the University of Alabama to discuss from Mark Shapiro. We know percentages of revenue WWE is paying out to its talent as of 2022. So much to get through. How are you, Brandon?
I'm fine. How are you?
Well, it's been a quiet week. Didn't know what we were going to fill this show with, and then as always, we have quite a lot. And just as if it wasn't enough, they're landing right in your inbox, Brandon, today. Proxy statement day.
It's proxy statement day.
I mean, what better? Is it noteworthy to you, the fact that you are getting these sent directly from TKO?
No, because you just sign up for it. Don't.
Sorry. Am I blowing our cover?
You just sign up. You just go to the investor relations website and you just subscribe. It's not a special access list or anything.
They think they've got you and I figured out, and they don't even know the lengths of where we go to make sure everything is sent to us. Okay. But
as you know, as you are bombarded with various emails via my many systems that scan the world for various forms of information and delegate and sort that information and deliver it straight to our inboxes, and there's not much anybody can do to stop that.
Yeah, if that guy Aaron Weitzman at WrestleMania was the scrap king of New York, Brandon Thurston is the scrape king of Buffalo, New York. Okay, so don't ever try and let any documents go out into the world without believing that he's got a magnet for all documents relevant to our discussions.
Yes, but we have a lot of competition that we're going up against tonight. Do you realize that?
The NFL draft is on, right?
The NFL draft, Sabres versus Bruins,
ooh,
and TNA Impact at the top of the hour, right?
That's right. Impact starts in about a half an hour as well. The Leafs aren't playing tonight.
I was going to ask you, how are the Leafs doing in the playoffs?
They're gearing up for 2027. They're looking ahead. They're sitting back and just going to wait for how this plays out. And dare I say, our Blue Jays not looking too strong a month into this season either. Raptors are still alive, I believe, in the first round, although that could be dated by the time people are listening to this. So, yeah, it's a terrible time in Toronto sports overall.
Now, for all the people who are watching closely the Sabres game, I could not help but I mean the two Sabres games that have happened up to this point. I watched those two games and I could not help but think that maybe they were just, dragging their feet, dragging their skates, if you will, for the first 2.5 periods until playing really well in the last 15 minutes or so of the game, just to make those last 15 minutes look good. Just to make night one, period one and period two look weak by contrast, but to make that last portion look really strong. I think that was the strategy.
That's the modern strategy, typically. Tank the first night, come back the second, and make sure that the lasting impression will overwrite all the previous poor hockey play. So, WrestleMania, nights 1 and 2 are now in the
I did watch some of it.
How much of it did you watch? Did you hit an hour combined?
No, I think the Sabres were playing on Sunday night. So all I saw on Sunday night was what aired on. Well, all right, I did watch Brock and Obafemi. And I had on the ladder match. But I did watch, I think, most of night one. If this were Marshan and Oran, R.I.P., they're still alive, but the show's not.
They're alive. They're just not doing a podcast together.
If this was a who's up, who's down, who's up is Obafemi.
Yes.
My who's down would be the TKO brand.
TKO brand took a big number of bullets this past weekend, I think. I think the overall build they did, and this certainly compares well to the overall vibe. Like, in all combat sports right now, like, TKO is kind of being viewed in similar lenses.
Not in the U.S. Senate. Everything is fine before the U.S. Senate.
Well, listen, they do have a expert ex-agent / lawyer / WWE president that is more than equipped to handle the boxing industry, and Senator Ted Cruz, as we will be getting to today as well. Nothing like a 90-minute hearing featuring
Ring announcer Ted Cruz. I like to call him now.
My God, yes. We have clips, folks. You've been warned. So night one finished. We'll go with the WrestleTix number first. The last number from WrestleTix was 49,918. If I have that correct. There might have been an adjusted number. Okay, the last number was 50,081. There was a subsequent update after the 49,000 number. Okay, so 50,081. And then night two, 52,011. And for those not looking at the slide, how does this compare to last year, Brandon?
It's down. Night one was down. So we're in the WrestleTix universe here, where WrestleTix is, of course, estimating, analyzing the Ticketmaster ticket map. Was this an act? No. Anyway, it was down 17% on Saturday and down 15% on Sunday.
Also, surrounding WrestleMania weekend, we had just over 9,900 as the last WrestleTix number for SmackDown, the Friday before WrestleMania weekend. That's down 38% from the Polestar number that we have from last year for that SmackDown. And then Raw, doing 13,217. That was down 21% from a Polestar number we had last year for the Vegas shows as well. So all of these events were down, and the question we still don't know is the gate figures for the 2 nights of WrestleMania, and at least we have an indication that it's going to fall below $66 million, according to WWE's own press release, where they referred to WrestleMania 42 as one of the highest grossing events in company history. WWE said they had a record or near record performance across gate, sponsorship, and merchandise. WWE also said that both nights of WrestleMania, they're going with their attendance number of 106,072 across 2 nights. I would think, Brandon, that this could not be lower than number 2 of all time, even including Saudi Arabia. Would you have reason to believe otherwise? I can't imagine this was below 50 between both nights.
I think that's a good ballpark. It's really hard to know. I think we just don't know what the other stadium shows, like the Royal Rumble of last year, I think broke some sort of record. They're not giving us numbers on things like that, and we haven't found those particular numbers. That's Indianapolis in particular. I'm sure I'm sure each night is within the top 5. I'd be pretty confident in that all time, adjusted for inflation, all that good stuff.
I could see this being a record for sponsorships, being above last year. I guess gate probably obviously below last year, and merchandise, who's to say? Like maybe that came short too, but we don't know.
Yeah. But there were some good site fees, some good incentives, some good financial incentive packages, FIPs as we like to call them, right? I don't know if we're jumping to that already. But
we can. Let's talk about the site fee, because you did uncover this information. That was the question mark. You had recently reported about the tax credit that they received from the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority, and then it remained, what was the site fee to go along with the tax credit?
So the tax credit is from the Governor's Office of Economic Development. The site fee is from my friends, the folks at the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority. Now, let's just lay it all out on the table here. I sent, you know what today is? Today, you know what today's date is? It's April 23rd, 2026, which marks 1 year since I sent a records request to the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority which they have still not responded to. They did respond to a separate records request that Jason Umpresser sent them that was much narrower. That's, that said, we want the contract and only the contract that will reveal the site fee and things like that. And they did produce it this past Tuesday, and we were able to report $6 million is the headline here. $6 million. Last year it was $5 million. So this is the government agency that promotes tourism. Tourism is very central to Las Vegas's economy for obvious reasons. And they really wanted, apparently, another WrestleMania for the second year in a row. And we've seen stats, I think, that are put out by the LVCVA itself that say tourism is down and visitors are down. And maybe they felt like they really were ready to up the ante for an extra $1 million, to go from $5 million to $6 million. So all total here, okay, there's a tax credit, which is a state level thing. Tax credit, which is calculated against how much you say you're going to spend. They're going to get $4.3 million. Well, they qualified for $4.3 million. There's an auditing process that has to happen. The receipts will have to be shown, but somewhere around $4.3 million plus $6 million. That's over $10 million before you've sold a single ticket, a single T-shirt, a single meet and greet. Before any fans have stalked you, you've made $10 million.
It's kind of like our business. Do you feel that the package, like it's hard because we don't know exactly what the incentives were in New Orleans, but like, does this paint at all a picture of what ultimately led to WWE's decision to move back to Las Vegas? Like, I certainly look at this as something that, Vegas is home base to TKO. And I think that the difference of like tourism, I think they are going, if there's anywhere they were going to go to such an extreme here, it was aiding with Vegas here. But now we know at least the financial incentives to move this card from one location to the next.
So Louisiana does have a film tax credit program. A lot of these states do. I imagine it's a lot of, these states that aren't states probably like New York and California. Maybe they do have programs like this. But anyway, I think a lot of these states want to attract this kind of filming work that gets work for, in this case, probably a lot of stagehands. And just going by what's on the website for Louisiana's version of this, they give a 25% credit. So I think that means that they would have gotten a return of about 25% of what they would have spent, which kind of would have doubled what they would have gotten, or what they probably will get from Las Vegas or from Nevada, which comes out to about 12%. I think we do the math. I know there's different math. There's different ways they calculate this, but it came out to about 12%. So I don't know, maybe they would have gotten something like $8 million and change. And I don't know if the Greater New Orleans Sports something was one of the organizations that was involved in joining WWE for the announcement that WrestleMania was going to be in New Orleans. I don't know if they were giving any site fee. I mean, that is a really strong film tax credit, and I bet that's a strong reason why we've seen a number of WrestleManias in New Orleans over the years. Maybe they were giving a small site fee on top of that. I imagine this just comes down to money, and I imagine maybe WWE, sort of took into account the notion that, well, we're going to be asking people to go to Las Vegas 2 years in a row, but maybe the offer from Las Vegas was just too good to pass up.
And excluding the Saudi Arabia shows, this site fee for this year's WrestleMania would be second to New Jersey last summer for SummerSlam, which I believe was around $7.1 million. Off the top of my head.
This is why Mark had to invent this great terminology, because everything is so complicated, right? There's different kinds of incentives, right? There's the straight up site fee from a local organization. There's this film tax credit, right? If you combine that, this is over $10 million. That's more than the $7.1 or $2 million from New Jersey, right? I don't know if New Jersey has a film tax credit that might have been giving them additional incentives or not. But yes,
as
in terms
such,
of
going forward, we'll be referring to these site fees more broadly as financial incentive packages, or as we like to call them, FIPs.
Thanks, Mark. You're going to get a really great bonus this year. I think they got something like 10 million. I don't know of any case where they've gotten as much as 10 million for one. I don't want to say show, because obviously there's a number of shows, but for one set of events.
So then we also got the viewership figures for night 1 and night 2, with the first hour on Saturday airing on ESPN2, which averaged 1,616,000 viewers and a .62 in the 18 to 49 demographic. And WWE put out a press release promoting this as the most watched telecast of the year on ESPN2, which featured the LA Knight Usos match against The Vision and I Show Speed, and Jacob Fatu against Drew McIntyre. The next night on ESPN proper, they did 1,822,000 viewers and a .65 in the demo, with the Brock Lesnar Obafemi match and the 6-man ladder match for the Intercontinental title, where they noted it was the most viewed telecast of the weekend on ESPN. And for the first time getting a sense of there was 1 year I feel they did, I think it was the WrestleMania at MetLife in 2019. I believe they did a window on some broadcaster. I don't recall off the top of my head, but regardless, I would say that the Sunday one, like, I was thinking this Sunday show had the chance of doing in like the 3 million viewer range. They had a really big match that they had promoted in Lesnar and Obafemi. But I think this is ultimately something that ESPN will probably do this again, whether it's for every pay-per-view or at least for big ones. I do see this being something they do try again.
I think you're thinking of WrestleMania in 2014, where it was on NBC. Like, it was a special on NBC like a week later or something like that.
Okay. I had thought there was like the countdown portion that aired, but I would have to double check.
Anyway, I'm not particularly surprised by these numbers. I don't think I mean, it's easy to say after the fact, but the vibes that I have for what a pay-per-view would do on traditional TV, it feels like there are such grooves worn into the behavior of whoever's watching these TV shows that tells me what the viewership that's capable of being attracted for wrestling is generally what's been driven into the habitual behavior of people watching on Monday night or Friday night. The complication here, I mean, 1.8 million viewers to me sounds pretty good. I mean, that's better than what SmackDown does, right? Yep. Which is the biggest number that we really have a strong handle of. 1.6 would be bigger than most SmackDown numbers, I think. The trouble is, right, some of it was watched on ESPN Unlimited, because if you were deciding to sit down and watch the whole thing, and if you have the privilege of being able to authenticate in to ESPN Unlimited via your pay TV provider, then you probably just set that at 6 o'clock and you weren't flipping back and forth, but in all likelihood. So some of this, to some degree, there were additional people watching. So maybe it was 2 million people watching those first two matches, or maybe a lot more than 2 million.
You realize there's a whole cottage industry now of PR representatives that will make it very clear when these numbers come out that there is also a streaming component to them. They will remind you very much if you write any stories about these.
Yeah. First, let's give credit where credit is due. These numbers, at least the total viewership number, I think I had the demo first. Total viewership number first reported by WB Partner Front Office Sports. But yeah, some of this is streaming. I guess I think a WrestleMania, if you put it on ESPN, the whole thing exclusively on ESPN proper, it would do a much bigger number. Of course it would. But I just don't know how much bigger it can really get for a wrestling show, even if it's WrestleMania. And I don't think they're going to do this a lot more times. It's not like, I mean, they could have done it with Royal Rumble. Maybe the timing is an issue there, but they haven't done it yet. And
they are promoting Backlash for another 6 p.m. Eastern start time as opposed to the usual 7 o'clock. So they're not promoting though any window yet on any of the linear channels. Just that is an earlier start time than normal. There's a UFC pay-per-view that night that they also might want to be getting ahead of. But we will see.
Royal Rumble got what the treatment of a week later or a couple weeks later on ESPN.
That's right.
It's all going to be a programmer's thing too, right? Like, is there other sports programming that has to be prioritized? It'll depend on that, I'm sure.
So we went through the site fee and such, and a lot of the business figures attached. There was there was an inordinate amount of coverage going into WrestleMania, and I would say coming out of it, of the media that WWE really covets when it comes to sports media and a lot more like sports business outlets. There's a lot that focused on just where the ticket demand was and the pricing of tickets. Like there was a lot of that, and I think some of it was sort of they fanned the flames themselves by making this part of the ongoing story with Pat McAfee. But that was certainly a big talking point, and it was not limited to just wrestling sites. It was
John Pollock, as quoted in the how do you pronounce your name? John Pollock, as quoted in the Hollywood Reporter.
I mean,
by our friend Tony Maglio.
I did have to ask for a small correction, which they were very quick to jump upon. But yes, like that is the stuff that I don't know. I don't get as strong a reaction of how much like. I am certain that WWE, they're going to be more reactive to that level of media covering this as opposed to
John Cena acknowledged it when he announced the attendance.
I chose the over. What I wanted to know is what was the line set at? What was the over-under that John was about to announce? Because he announced a number that, as we went over, very much under if last year was the comparison. So, man, maybe John had even more measured expectations for Mania without him.
We'll have to check their market sponsorship partner to see where they were setting the lines.
Well, unaccounted for in their attendance was one Andreas Hale of ESPN, WWE partner ESPN, as Andreas wrote on X Saturday afternoon. I will not be covering WrestleMania for ESPN. WWE denied my credentials and blocked my access. Neither I nor ESPN has been told why. You can speculate on the reasons, but if you want answers, ask WWE. I asked WWE.
You did, yes, that's right.
And they have not. They're probably just preparing their answer, and we will, I'm sure, hear back and update you on that. So it's left us to speculate on the reasons, as Andreas has given us the green light to do here. Now, we did reporting on I would safely call a fractured relationship between WWE and Andreas Hale that certainly predated this past weekend when it goes back to his famous letter grading of both WrestlePalooza, and then as we noted, he did do another grading for the Crown Jewel Perth show in October, and after that, there have been no more letter grades, despite the fact that he is still grading UFC cards with letter grades. TKO owned UFC. And it appears that Andreas Hale has kind of been, pretty much persona non grata with WWE since this whole thing went down. And that was one of the questions because it was known, like Andreas Hale is based in Las Vegas, so it would only be natural that one of their lead wrestling reporters would be there, and as a partner with ESPN would be very much involved with the coverage. And on ESPN's, on the web portion, their like interviews were pretty much confined to one big profile piece on Paul Heyman that one of their staff writers conducted, but that was about the extent of it. Totally different than the TV side, which was inundated with WWE talent every single day to the point that there were complaints by ESPN viewers about how much WWE was on their programming every single day. But I'll tell you, Brandon, like this certainly got a lot of focus on Saturday afternoon. I was semi-surprised at how little attention this got outside of wrestling coming out of the weekend. That not so much the fact WWE would deny someone's credentials, but I think the fact that it was a partner and that partner was ESPN, I thought that would garner a lot of attention.
It was the partner that was broadcasting the event.
Like that to me was like a notable story that you would assume a lot of these same outlets that we just mentioned, like your sports media outlets, I thought they would really focus on this. And I did not see all that coverage. Like a lot of it was, sites like ours or, similar wrestling sites that all covered this. But it seemed like WWE made this decision and they were willing to accept any criticism online,
and they apparently will not tell Andreas Hale the reason.
No, that's another part. Like they're not even giving any reason why. It's just denying credentials. Now, obviously, this did not impact others at ESPN. I'm not aware of any other ESPN people that were not given credentials beyond Andreas Hale. But this was, I mean, it kind of shows you like where this stands in terms of Andreas and with WWE. But I think it's always a horrible look when you're denying legitimate reporters credentials for an event and the reasoning behind it, which stems from what we had reported on.
So he did grade WrestlePalooza a C, which got a lot of attention back in September.
A C.
He did grade, was it Crown Jewel in October, a B, which got less attention.
Funny how that works.
He did, we should note, he did report on if I bring up the right page, the Janelle Grant affidavit in early April when that was filed. Unknown if that's a factor.
Yep.
Our Truth seems to be happy that he has not gotten access related to some tweets about our Truth that Andreas Hale made like 10 years ago.
Yeah. Yes, with this tweet that surfaced where, I mean, in a nutshell, I'm not going to use the term, but that Andreas was very critical of the portrayal of Ron Killings. And I feel that I thought it was very disingenuous, the people that were criticizing Andreas Hale, who is black himself, and discussing this. But, I mean, it's really not for us to break down said tweet. But if like that certainly came up, and that was our Truth's reaction to the elimination of Andreas Hale from coverage over the weekend.
So what's the lesson here for anybody in this?
Oh, clearly
episode?
It's how dare you grade something a C? I don't know where you are on this one. I look at ESPN more in this one. Like, it's fine for people to get upset online, and you can write your stories about this. It's a bad look for WWE. They get a bad afternoon of coverage because of this decision, which by the end of the weekend, I don't think they really took this one on the chin all that much. There's very few pressure points. The famous Snickers doctrine that was authored by the man to my right here emphasized, like, who are the ones that have actual pressure points with WWE? And fans and media, it's very low. But a broadcast partner and an ESPN broadcast partner, they do have weight that is carried here. And to me, like, from my observation here, like, ESPN, like, from the top up here, did not have this guy's back. And I would think, like, if I'm ESPN, it's like, no, you don't like this guy? That's tough. We're working together, and he's at this show. And that's where you do throw your weight around here, because WWE is reliant on ESPN and vice versa. And pulling a power play like this on the day of WrestleMania, it's not like this was months ago or weeks ago that they waited till Saturday to inform this guy he's not being credentialed for the event. Like, who had... I don't know if there was any fight inside, but to me, ESPN at the very least, and they did this with Ariel, well, I should say that MMA Fighting did this with Ariel Helwani, like, no even statement about this. Like, hey, we value Andreas Hale, like, no public statement on ESPN's behalf. And it just, like, if this had happened in another sport, this would have been a much bigger story. And because it's pro wrestling, it's not taken seriously. And it's like, well, the media doesn't count in pro wrestling, and it's WWE. So we're not going to give it that oxygen.
And back in September, when this relationship began, and ESPN was nice enough to hold a media call that invited a lot of people to ask questions.
Do you want to play it? I've got it here, actually.
Go for it.
Here, this is from last September, right before WrestlePalooza. You will recognize the voice asking the question.
With the increase of this partnership between WWE and ESPN, is there reassurance you can provide to us that reporters who report on WWE for ESPN will still have full independence in how they cover WWE or even WWE's competitors, for that matter?
Yeah, I think the answer to that is an emphatic yes.
Unequivocal yes. I mean, that's separation of church and state. Ben, I know we have some PR folks on here that could probably underscore that, but yes.
Yes, they use the term church, which starts with a C, which is a letter that is banned now, and it's a 25-letter alphabet that's happening in Bristol, Connecticut. That's what's being taught to all aspiring journalists that want to cover WWE. Listen, going into the deal, I'm sure they thought that was the case, but when the rubber hit the road, I mean, who did they back here? And to me, the fact that I really believed on Saturday, Brandon, that there would be they would quietly just do a backpedal, allow Andreas in, story's dead. But if you are WWE, it feels like they made this move, they absorbed whatever complaints there were, and they got what they wanted. They didn't have Andreas there for either night, and coming out of it, it's not like they suffered really any significant ramifications. And as I posted about this, it's not even so much Andreas Hale, who's been doing this a long time. I imagine he's going to continue to do the work he does. But if you are just entering an ESPN outlet, you are being told without being told how far to go and what to cover and what stories not to cover, because I don't want to be in the crosshairs here. I might not have much of a following, and I am just a random reporter at the bottom rung of this company that I am not going to rattle any cages. I think it's a horrible message that you're sending to any reporters. And at this point, it's really a question of just being so embedded with a company when you're trying to do reporting at the same time as you're a rights partner. And I think it's a horrible position that you find yourself in. And this example, I mean, it just extrapolates that.
We should point out the two executives that I asked that question to were not people who overseen the editorial side of their programming, executives Matt Kenny and John Lasker. Nonetheless, they were speaking on behalf of ESPN. The ethics and the fairness or the look of WWE to the public in this, is there any pragmatic argument about, is this actually a good idea for WWE to have done this? Is it, we don't have to, I mean, maybe it does, in this sort of, if you want to be cynical, like, in this media world, we're going to reward people who give us coverage that is good for us. And we're going to avoid and minimize. I don't know if this is minimizing. This is a Streisand effect, but we're going to try to deter in some sort of effective way people who give us coverage that does not help us.
I think this was an example of WWE sort of flexing, like we don't want this guy here, and we're going to stop it. And what blowback are we going to receive from this? Is ESPN going to be unhappy with this? Like, for those that forget, like the Ariel Helwani situation that happened a decade ago now was, he had reported on this fight with Brock Lesnar's return the night of a UFC pay-per-view in Los Angeles. And him and two of his colleagues were then escorted out of the arena, and it was said, like, you will never be back here again. And there was such an outcry about this.
This is because Ariel reported that Brock Lesnar was
coming back to fight Mark Hunt, and he reported it several hours before they did the reveal on the broadcast. And
I believe Dana's complaint was that he didn't reach out beforehand.
Which he had. It was just that he had reported this fight, and that it wasn't that he ruined the surprise.
He did his job, which is bad. Yeah.
And there was so much like mainstream attention that this received that Vox Media and UFC, UFC had to rescind this. And I was at the very next pay-per-view, and Ariel was back at the next pay-per-view. And in this one, it feels like there is not going to be that reversal here unless WWE on its own makes that decision. But it does not feel as though, I hope that there is a better outcome to this, but it sort of feels like WWE pushed its weight around and they realized they could, and they did. And that's how this feels like it came out of the weekend, as being like, this is going to be the tack that they took. And it tells you that they could take this tact with anyone. If you can pull this with a partner's reporter, I mean, it tells you, like, there's, not to say that it's like, it is a bit of a, I don't know everyone's necessary incentive about night of coverage at these events, but that's almost like a separate point of the fact of whether or not you're going to be allowing media to cover your events, period. Like, what is it that they are seeking here? And it's, they kind of have their pick of things. And also at a time, this will be my last point, and I'll stop. But like, with the elimination of press conferences, there's also no ability for any front-facing official with the company to have to respond to this either. So they've really they've really protected themselves from having to address any of it.
Unless there's a lawsuit on this someday. I have sort of had the thought experiment of that. I think this, now ESPN is obviously a big media outlet, even as an editorial entity, right? Everybody recognizes the ESPN brand, and they've done a lot of, important high reach journalism. And I've thought about this, like, even in our niche of wrestling coverage. Like, this is where I'm going to compliment Post Wrestling, and if I were reporting the kinds of stories that I've reported for Post Wrestling for a different, even wrestling media outlet, and let's say that wrestling media outlet was very reliant on WWE, whether it's for talent interviews or for certain scoops or whatever it might be, would I be able to report what I report? I'm not sure.
The incentive structure is a very problematic one, because I always say, like, you kind of have to figure out, like, what is your laneway of making some kind of living or just working at a certain outlet. And if that does require cooperation with a company, and I don't even say that like just in terms of having access at shows or having interview availabilities, like there is going to be a push and pull with that. It's very rare that you're going to have places that can operate without that access or reliance on it. And I think like just the more and more I feel like it's very important to have those places that you don't have that reliance, because it's a power imbalance that you are entering, that your livelihood is contingent on keeping the company just at least on good terms with. And that is, I think, going to color someone's coverage if that is a key part of keeping the lights on and having your business plan being enacted.
Yeah, this is really, I think, the fact that it is ESPN is sort of a double-edged sword, right? There's ESPN who should have the leverage, right? Because they are this very valuable partner. But then again, they are this partner who also wants to make the other side of that equation, that partnership being WWE, happy. But it's very much, I think, like the theory of like the book Manufacturing Consent, right? Which I think is about, at least in part, the notion that corporate media has to rely on things like advertisements and other kinds of partnerships, and because of those relationships, they tend to only be incentivized to publish the sorts of stories and media that doesn't upset those corporate interests. And I think that's sort of what we have here. And it's not that it's a predetermined process, but that the incentives just create that outcome, so that you have writers and columnists and whatever, journalists and media people who absolutely believe what they're saying. But that's just the result of the incentive structure determining the media world in which that is the case, rather than some people meeting up in dark rooms and saying, we're going to predetermine a media environment that is favorable only to us. You create the incentive structures that produce that environment, and that's maybe this is in the long term. That's what WWE gets out of this.
I think so, and it's like WWE's own sort of like, it's not a reliance, but its relationship with various media entities. I think it's almost parsed down at this point that they are like, they want coverage, and I think like there's more than just a handful that are more than willing to, that will cover things that are not going to. The problem I have with this is that, like, again, this started off with a letter grade. Like, this is absolutely preposterous when you think about like the level of, and part of that was also the amount of focus it got as well, that I'm sure just amplified it. But like it's preposterous. Like I wouldn't even
just like super. I would describe that as a super online story. That's something that people who are very online really cared about, and that's exactly the sort of thing that you have Nick Khan rolling out here saying he doesn't care about stuff like that, when their actions say otherwise.
Like, it's one thing to talk about like some of these like bigger stories that are concerning the company or Vince McMahon. Like this started with a goddamn C letter grade for a pay-per-view.
Well, people care a lot more about that than the latest story about Vince McMahon.
We got to keep moving here because we have a bunch of stuff. We're going to move on over to everyone's favorite topic, Mark Shapiro. You know what? Let's start with the proxy statement, and then we're going to move to Mark Shapiro's recent testimony in the shareholders' lawsuit. So the proxy statement dropped today. How did Ari and Mark fare?
What's a proxy statement?
Tell us about the proxy statement, and what does this reveal to us?
A
And
proxy
please tell me-
statement.
I was just going to ask. I hope that attendance was also taken throughout 2025 among the board members.
It was. Well, it sort of is. So a proxy statement is something that comes out every year, and it gives us some information. It's an SEC filing that's required that every publicly traded company that filings with the SEC has to publish your proxy statement, and it's ahead of your it has something to do with your shareholders meeting that happens once a year, which is different from a board meeting. Okay. Anyway, what you get from it is they have to disclose the compensation to board members and to, I believe it's the top 5 executives, the top 5 most highly paid executives. So, I think Nick Khan is no longer among the top 5. Anyway, what we now know is how much money Ari Emanuel and Mark Shapiro made in terms of total compensation. Because when you're Mark Shapiro and Ari Emanuel, when you're a top 5 executive, you get compensation in all directions. You get base salary, you get bonuses, you get stock awards, you get some other stuff too. So anyway, Ari Emanuel got paid in 2025 $67 million for 1 year. $67 million.
That's what it is. I mean, it's an eat what you kill world.
And Mark Shapiro, who is the president and COO of TKO, got $43 million. $43 million for Mark Shapiro. And then we have Nick Khan, who got $24 million.
Rough.
Yes. And there's others too. We have Andrew Schleimer, who's the CFO, who got 25. I think that is 20. Is it 25 or 23? I think it's $23 million. And then Seth Krause, who is the chief legal and administrative officer, I believe, his title is something close to that. He got just about $10 million.
Wow. They could pool their resources and really spend a lot on the banana tangerine budget for the next Hall of Fame catering for Kevin Nash.
I don't see how that helps shareholder value.
I don't either. You know what? Here's your potassium, Kevin, and we'll see you in 9 hours at the end of this day.
Now, the median, thanks to our friend, who was it? Not Chuck Todd. The senator.
Chuck Todd was covering all this.
the former senator from Connecticut, I forget his first name. The Todd Frank. This is
Chris Todd,
and I think this is Barney Frank. Anyway, Dodd. Anyway, because of this act that they passed, part of what it requires is now in your SEC filing, you have to publish your CEO pay ratio. This is not particularly new. This has been happening for at least a few years. And so the median TKO staffer, this does not include wrestlers, this does not include fighters or any independent contractors. The median TKO employee was paid $82,000 in 2025. And the SEC is mean, and they make you publish what that is as a factor of your CEO's pay. And Ari Emanuel got paid 813 times the median TKO employee. I did not have time to look. So in past years, WWE has published this number as well, and I think it's been higher. I think it's been as high as $100,000. I wonder if just absorbing all the other former Endeavor entities into TKO has changed their sort of employee makeup so that they have more low-paid employees. I don't think it's the case that they have lowered people's salaries. There have been some lack of raises in the tradition that WWE raises used to be. That is different now under TKO. But yeah, 813 times the median employee. But when you're Ari Emanuel and you bring that much value, capitalism rewards you.
In fairness, he just launched a podcast, okay? So it was a big year.
Yes.
We also had Mark Shapiro. So this is up on the site right now.
Do you want to talk about Dwayne? Do you want to talk about Dwayne?
Oh, yeah. Let's talk about Dwayne because, yes, we did get this little nugget of information when it came to board meetings. And, of course, Dwayne Johnson has been a member of the board since January of 2024.
Yeah, and he got a big $30 million stock deal to come on to be a board member. He got some royalties in this year. He got almost $1 million in royalties. They round this to like $900,000 in royalties. He also got $600,000 towards certain travel expenses. How much did Dwayne Johnson appear on WWE programming in 2025 calendar year?
He showed up on a SmackDown. He did the angle at Elimination Chamber.
He announced WrestleMania in February in New Orleans, which
That's
didn't
right,
happen.
in New Orleans. It was definitely under 5 appearances because after Elimination Chamber, we never saw him again.
Right, so he was on some TV. Okay, well, so he got paid nicely, and he gets certain travel expenses. That's part of his deal, I guess. By the way, he is a board member. And I take it one thing that you have to report when you're doing your SEC filings and you're doing your proxy statement is they want to know that your board members are actually going to board meetings. So they say that there must be some sort of requirement about 75% of the meetings. They say everybody who's on our board is attending at least 75% of the board meetings, with the exception of Mr. Johnson, who was unable to attend several board meetings due to prior business commitments.
Man's busy. Okay, he can't be bothered for these board of directors.
Can't zoom in. I think a lot of these happen on Zoom based on what we're seeing in the merger lawsuit.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope that there was a Zoom option for him, but I mean, sometimes Wi-Fi can be very tricky depending on what part.
Do they have that on private planes?
Listen, it's tough. Okay, just give Dwayne a break. Mark Shapiro. Now we will move on to the story, which was very interesting. So, going back to the merger to form TKO in 2023, we got the TKO story, okay? And WWE wrote in its regulatory filing that Endeavor, presumably its CEO Ari Emanuel, held the belief that McMahon's continued leadership would, quote, be critical to the value creation driving Endeavor's desire to engage in the potential transaction, end quote. The filing further stated that McMahon had not and was not requesting or proposing such rights. According to WWE's narrative, guaranteeing McMahon's continued role was key to Endeavor agreeing to raise WWE's split of the combined company from 43 to 49%. And this synced up with Ari Emanuel's public comments right after the WrestleMania that year when they were on CNBC and just stating how much he said, "Oh God, yes, we need Vince. It's Vince McMahon." However, Mark Shapiro was deposed in December and asked, this is in the ongoing shareholders lawsuit, whether he personally viewed McMahon remaining in the executive chair role as being a necessary condition for the success of the combined company. So that is what the WWE TKO story had been. Shapiro said he did not see it as necessary. He said, quote, he was asked, "You personally didn't view Vince being in the executive chair role as a necessary condition for the future success of the combined company, right?" This was an attorney asking Shapiro. Shapiro's response, "Correct, especially with all the baggage. But at the end of the day, Vince remaining with the company was a Vince goal, not an Endeavor goal, right?" The examining attorney followed up, and Shapiro made it clear. "Wasn't a goal of ours. No, it was not." So this suggests more so this was Vince McMahon pushing for his role in this company and thus upping the equity as well, more than a overture by Endeavor of Vince McMahon being the necessary package, at least going by Mark Shapiro's testimony, which somewhat or very much contradicts the filing that they had put out in 2023.
Yeah, I guess what's troubling about this most of all is that it appears someone is not telling the truth, whether that's WWE's SEC filing or whether that's Mark Shapiro under oath. I would think in both of those cases, one would have a lot of incentive to tell the truth.
Yes.
It certainly contradicts what Ari Emanuel said, saying he would body slam Vince if he didn't stay. I mean, running up to this deal being announced and being shopped through the whole process, I think there was reasonable skepticism about whether Vince would really accept a deal. I mean, it's a question that Morgan Brennan asked Nick Khan just before the deal was signed on CNBC. I mean, it was in the ether, not just on wrestling podcasts, this question about whether Vince, who had been so closely associated with this company for decades, who was embattled, who was embroiled in scandal and sexual misconduct allegations, who had just come back and unilaterally used an instrument called written consent because he was the controlling stockholder, whether he would accept a deal that made him go back away. I mean, you just returned to the company unilaterally and you're surrounded in scandal and really bad allegations. So that was sort of the thought process. Why would he force his way back into the company and then accept a deal that pushed him right back out? Now this is sort of a central part of what this shareholder lawsuit is about, is that, well, you're not supposed to put your interests first if those interests deviate so starkly from the general shareholder interest. So this is an issue. I don't know that there's I don't know if there's legal liability for WE here, and if they put something false in their S4 SEC filing. I did ask a law professor named Professor Ann Lipton, who is a law professor from Colorado University, and she said that there might be a federal law question here, but this shareholder lawsuit, of course, is at the state level. It's in Delaware Chancery Court, so that doesn't appear to be something that they are specifically, in terms of a legal issue, it's not something that they're pursuing. But it is, in terms of telling this whole story about how this deal came together, it's something that really stood out to us, that they put that in their filing, that Endeavor insisted, and not just insisted on keeping McMahon, but essentially gave up 6 percentage points in equity.
Just very significant.
They said, and I've done the math a bunch of times now, they said, remember when this deal was announced, this is a $21 billion deal. I mean, these companies are worth more now, but this is a $21 billion deal. 6% of $21 billion is more than $1 billion. It's like $1.2 billion. So, I mean, I think, I wonder if it raises questions for Endeavor shareholders. That was a publicly traded company at the time. You gave up over $1 billion in equity to keep McMahon, but wait, now you say you didn't. So it just raises lots of questions, and sheds some light. Well, I don't know.
This whole shareholder lawsuit, Brandon, to me is like, this is like the story of the year, because there is more information that we are learning by the week. And with all due respect here, Brandon has totally led the charge on this by being able to uncover a lot of this, because we are getting like unbelievable information of what went into this merger. We are getting major key figures that have been deposed for this, and it is percolating beyond just the merger to like many other business deals, and like getting a remarkable insight into TKO.
And these were all sealed. I mean, this is, so we should point out too, right? This is from a deposition. This is ultimately from Mark Shapiro's deposition, which this is a portion of Mark Shapiro's deposition that was read into the record of Nick Khan's deposition. We don't have the Mark Shapiro deposition itself. That we have some excerpts from it, but we don't have this portion of it that was read into the record. So that's what's going on. We have lots of the Nick Khan deposition, though. And I should mention, too, there is a second notice of challenge process that's playing out. What's called the DNO defense, which is basically the WWE defendants, did file a motion to maintain certain information. Should we talk about that? Did file a motion to maintain certain information, to maintain confidentiality over certain information, including speculation about who the Wall Street Journal's sources were in former board member Michelle McKenna's deposition. They also want to withhold audio files, which are of voicemails that were left by 3 different voicemails that were left by, I think, 2 and 1, a couple by either Vince and the others by Ari Emanuel. I have filed an opposition to their motion to maintain confidentiality over those 2 categories. There's some other personally identifiable information that I am not opposing. So the judge will make a decision eventually about that, just like in the case where KKR was opposing, was trying to maintain certain information confidential. So KKR did not prevail in that case, and I'm confident that WWE is not going to prevail in this case either.
Another story I definitely wanted to talk about, because since we were off last week, we didn't get to discuss this, but another story that you had was WWE talent being paid about 15% of company revenue in 2022 that came out in the court filings as well. You mentioned the fact here that WWE spent an implied average of about $1.5 million per main roster talent in 2022. That average may be skewed by top earning wrestlers. That year, WWE spent $195 million on talent, including developmental, which was about 15% of the company's overall revenue of $1.29 billion. Now, it does also highlight pay to main roster talent nearly doubled between 2020 and 2022, going from $890,000 on average to $1.5 million. And for the first time, like, this has always been assumed, but we never had hard data about the percentage that was being paid out to talent. This is going back a couple of years, but it would certainly, it's definitely in line with UFC that we have seen the court filings, that it was basically plugged in to be in the range of 15 to 20% in those years and not to exceed that 20% threshold. And it would seem very similar here for WWE as well when it comes to talent and what percentage of revenue that they are being paid at the company's discretion.
Yeah. I mean, it's well below what players in major sports organizations are getting. I know you've done so many shows. That's a very good review. You've done so many shows between then and now with the daily podcast. I think we talked about this on whatever day we published this on.
Yes, we did talk about this last week on
we covered
the
this
show
pretty thoroughly.
I do encourage people to check this out, though, because it's a really interesting insight into the main roster pay. Now, I'm sure all of our boxing fans have been waiting with bated breath, because on Wednesday, we went to Washington, D.C. for a hearing overseen by everyone's favorite Republican senator from Texas, Ted Cruz.
In the right corner of the panel, formerly the co-head of television at Creative Artist Agency, where he represented the biggest names and entities in sports media, and now the president of World Wrestling Entertainment and a promoter of Zuffa Boxing. We welcome to this committee Mr. Nick Khan.
Create the framework for unified boxing organizations, otherwise known as UBOs, that can do what major sports do: promote competition, develop talent, enforce consistent standards across one roof. A 6-year cap on promotional contracts comparable to rookie contracts in baseball and football, giving boxers a genuine path to free agency. We at TKO, as you know, it's a publicly traded company. Everything is public. Our media rights deals are public. I mentioned just briefly in the hallway earlier, the results of WrestleMania this past weekend, including the gate, are public. There's nothing that
wait a minute.
Make public unless we want to face government real ramifications with the SEC and potentially DOJ. So they're made available on a quarterly basis. The WBC for Canelo Crawford, they hold themselves out as a nonprofit. They purchased $265,000 of tickets for that event and insisted upon a suite for the president of their company. It's a mess.
Mr. Khan, if you could answer a different question. What is it going to take to bring WrestleMania to Cleveland, Ohio? We're building a brand new stadium right next to the airport. It's the only dome stadium in a cold weather climate that will be right next to a major airport. But you can pick between 29 and 30. I'll leave that decision up to you.
Thank you.
The committee stands adjourned.
What a joke some of this was. But yes, folks, that was a...
Wait a minute. Everything is he
put that one in there just for you. Yes, every bit of WWE TKO
this did make my head explode when I heard him say this in real time. The gate is public? He said the WrestleMania gate is public.
Yeah, this was this week. This was post WrestleMania 42 that he said this.
The only WrestleMania gates that are made public are made public because we report them, quite frankly. Am I looking at the wrong place in the TKO investor relations website where they have all this public information?
It's a hidden tab on the TKO corporate website. So this was chaired by Ted Cruz, this being the U.S. Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation.
Who, by the way, he's the chairman. When he pounded his gavel to start the questioning, he pounded the gavel, and I don't know what he hit it on, but it made a ding ding sound.
Yeah, This hearing brought all of 3 senators to appear, one of which was Cruz, who was pretty much had to be here to oversee this, along with a Democrat, Jackie Rosen of Nevada, and the man you heard there painfully pitching Ohio to host WrestleMania was Bernie Moreno, just a total geek here, just constantly nagging Nick Khan. Can we get the confirmation on what year? Like as if like we were going to get a verbal agreement here in the room for WrestleMania.
There's going to be an FIP negotiation right there.
I mean, just no shame at all by this guy Bernie Moreno. But watching pretty much this whole hearing, I mean, Nick Khan came here extremely prepared, and Oscar De La Hoya was just no match for Nick Khan.
But there were 4 witnesses here. By far, he was the most eloquent, and it sounded pretty good to me what he was saying.
I mean, Nick Khan really leaned on, hearkening back to like Ted Cruz clearly was, at least grew up enamored with boxing, so he's leaning very heavily on the quote-unquote golden days of boxing. And there were a lot of arguments that were somewhat introduced. I thought Nico Ali Walsh, he's the grandson of Muhammad Ali, he was here as well and brought up several of them. But just not enough focus on the fact that, well, all of the protections for fighters, like why are you not adopting any of those protections for fighters? Like, yes, boxing is a mess, but a mess for who? It's like boxers are receiving the majority of the revenues. Yeah, I can imagine for promoters, that's a quote-unquote mess. And there's a lot that can be cleaned up with boxing. But yeah, TKO is arguing the fact that, hey, if we just have complete control of these fighters and we can have coercive contracts and we control the belts, we control the rankings. I mean, yes, we can just have all the control. We can describe, like, as we just go to our last story, like what percentage of revenue do you expect boxers to get under the TKO model? Do you think they're magically going to say, hey, you know what? These guys deserve 50%. Like this is ludicrous. It's they want to adjust this to like the UFC model, which is great for TKO and not so much for boxers. But and there are some good things in this bill as well. It's not like this is just some horrible, like all elements of it, but Nick Khan sold this thing brilliantly. I think this thing is going to sail past the Senate, and this will be signed into law.
Yes. What did you make of the issue that was? I mean, it's not like these witnesses were debating each other. They were sort of being asked questions by the senators, and they were sort of being invited to present their differing perspectives. And one of those issues was around safety. And I think Oscar De La Hoya was saying something about we use a lot of that money to ensure fighter safety. And then you had Nick Khan talking about how, this many boxers have died within so many days of their fight. Whereas he said, I think no UFC fighters, is that right?
Yeah.
Have died within a similar, range of their fight.
I mean, you're not going to argue like the fact is like,
is that a difference of actual safety implementation, or is that a difference of the sport?
I think that there is, I certainly look like, I think you break it down to the sport as well. Like an easy comparison that people make is the fact that, in boxing, like you can be knocked down and you have the ability to return to the fight. In MMA, it's like a knockout, like you're done. Like that is typically the end of a fight, and there's a lot less of the chance of like a second concussion if you have been concussed in a fight where you can continue and take a lot of damage, where there are there are only so many specific targets in boxing, whereas it's much more wide ranging in mixed martial arts of where a fight can go as well. Like both are going to present their dangers, and UFC can hang its hat on its safety record. It has not had a death. There have been deaths in MMA, but not the UFC itself as well. But that is going to be something that I don't think TKO is going to escape that either. Like boxing is going to be inherently dangerous, and it's one that I don't think it's an issue that you can necessarily throw money at, and it's going to eradicate the possibility of a fighter death.
So the House has already approved this. This was a Senate hearing. This will be voted on by the Senate, presumably. We've got here in the report from Jason Umpersur that Cruz said that he's open to bipartisan suggestions to modify the bill. So there could be changes. Sounds like there's a pretty good likelihood that this is going to be passed by the Senate in some form.
Yeah, they have a deadline coming up for questions, and then it's going to be finalized in several weeks, and then it will go to the process of being voted into the Senate. And it's expected to pass. Like, this does have bipartisan support. It's going to radically alter boxing, but it might not be something that is realized in year one, but in 5 years. An interesting element to all of this that we have not discussed is there was a story over the last week as well about Saudi Arabia's public investment fund is now divesting itself from LIV Golf. And it's like one of the first major signals of Saudi Arabia somewhat reeling in its sovereign wealth fund, and with the description that that the fund's governor is saying it is going to slow down some of its biggest projects as it focuses on, quote, increasing the efficiency of investments, which typically translates to we are going to cut back on some of this radical spending that we have been making. None of this has, well, in MMA, we have certainly seen less, PFL has not gone over there. There are less boxing cards are not exactly being populated in Saudi Arabia of late, but obviously Saudi Arabia is significantly invested in Zuffa boxing as well. But it's something at least to watch here, that there does seem to be some reining in of the purse strings of Saudi Arabia, which for the longest time just seemed to be unlimited.
And the deal with Saudi Arabia and WWE is a 10-year deal. It's roughly a 10-year deal that started in 2018. There were some missed events in the pandemic that Vince McMahon said would be tacked on to the end. So this could go a little bit beyond 2028. So I guess it's something that they may consider at that time. Maybe they're just going to 2030, Vision 2030, and we're all good.
But it will not be ending this June, because WWE has confirmed it is taking Night of Champions to Riyadh on June 27th, which was made official today. And yes, this will be their first event back since the Royal Rumble in January. We had reported on the fact that this was the date and that Riyadh had been cited as the location, but that there were definitely question marks as to whether or not they would in fact go through with this show because of the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. Back on March 27th, there was an Iranian strike in Saudi Arabia that injured 12 U.S. troops there. And certainly you can't predict where the war is going to be 2 months from now, but at least it was going to take WWE kicking and screaming to call off this show. And I wouldn't say this means absolute, but they're obviously pushing forward and confident enough to announce this 2 months out.
Yes. This was a press release that came out this morning. The only quotes in here are from His Excellency, Turki Al-Sheikh. I will say that there does seem to be a very strong relationship. Like all these pieces that add up with the especially the Turki Al-Sheikh relationship with WWE and the boxing endeavors that they're involved in. One thing that I found interesting reading through the Nick Khan deposition is his explanation about why do some of the Saudi officials call Vince father, and that's been evident, I think, on Twitter, right, where people were confused when Turki Al-Sheikh referred to Vince McMahon as his father, and Nick Khan explained that as when Vince and WWE decided to go ahead and still do the Crown Jewel 2018 show amid all of the controversy surrounding the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, when many others backed out, including Ari Emanuel severing his relationship at that time. Anyway, Vince being steadfast to stay in a business relationship with the Saudi government, it seems really bonded those Saudi officials with Vince to say, look, you stayed with us through this really difficult time.
Yeah, if everybody remembers, it was exactly a month after the Jamal Khashoggi murder that they go through with their Crown Jewel event. Like, it was like October 2nd was the murder, November 2nd they're in Saudi Arabia for that event, and there was a lot of heat on the company for going through with that show in 2018. We are now going to head to the University of Alabama, and we got this audio here of Mark Shapiro that was speaking to a group at the university, and it was brought up about the kind of the I guess, what is it? It was the question was phrased about TKO having this reputation of this almost being like a money grab, and Mark Shapiro, who took this one in stride. And the audio is a little tough to hear, but I think you'll make it out here about Shapiro's answer that did get a lot of attention because it was asked about who has the creative say-so within WWE with TKO overseeing it.
I'll kind of walk you through that. First of all, it has complete control. So we're responsible, good or bad, fact or fiction. You didn't hear about this stuff in the old days with WWE and Vince McMahon owned it because it was a private company for so many years. So they didn't put out like their financial results, if you will. Nobody knew. They knew it was successful and the brand was strong and it had a legion of fans, but they didn't really know how the business worked and what it was making, etc. Then Vince went public with WWE, and then TKO was formed with UFC and WWE coming together. So those two companies came together and launched TKO. And we're spending a lot more money to market the brand and market the content. And when you do that, you're going to win some folks over, but you're also going to chase some folks away. They don't like this, or they don't like that, or this is too expensive, or I don't want to have to, oh my God, I got to watch the WWE, I got to buy Netflix, which costs this much, I got to watch SmackDown on USA, I got to do that, I got to have CW, so I have to have cable or linear television, and now I have to pay for ESPN, and you can make some enemies really quickly.
You can make some enemies real quickly by signing all these competing deals that are going to...
So wait a minute. So the W and UFC merged in what year?
2023.
And that was right after W went public, right? So W went public in what, like 2021?
Was it? I think it was at least a year, if not 22 years before that.
Was it 2015 or something when they went public?
It was 1999 that they went public.
1999. But they didn't have to. Did they have to report their financials since 1999?
They only came up with that during the pandemic, the idea of financial disclosures. The SEC, very lax organization, if anyone's ever dealt with them.
W has been a publicly traded company since October 1999.
They've been public longer than they were a private company.
If you start the clock at 1980 or something. Yeah. We're not going back to Capital Wrestling days. Yeah, this idea, this has been a long-running head explosion for me. This idea that is talking about W's a publicly traded company now. They have to do the PG thing. It's a publicly traded company. It's been a publicly traded company since the Attitude Era.
Sometimes it is just what can we say? And will there be any retort to that? Is there any follow-up to that? Is there any pushback from that? And often there is not, but it is something when you are just hearing it in their own words about all this. But essentially what Mark Shapiro was saying was the fact the line that everyone kind of focused on was that we have the final say-so over creative, which a lot of people have assumed relates to this whole Pat McAfee experiment / disaster over the last month. But on top of that, the idea that, we're really promoting the brand and we're bringing in celebrities, and we're going to turn some people off, but hey, you gotta crack some eggs to make an omelet, and that's the TKO way in 2026.
I guess in his defense, the quote is, first of all, we, being TKO, has complete creative control, so we're responsible. I guess what he's trying to do there is take responsibility to say whatever it is, whether good or bad, we should get the credit or the blame. Maybe,
I didn't read it as as some others did about they have their finger on everything.
Right.
In fact,
this is not a line that was massaged by his various PR executives.
No. There maybe could be some parsing of that language, but yes, if they have a strong idea about incorporation, certainly they're going to have that influence. But the idea that Ari or Mark or Andrew Schleimer are calling in on creative meetings and going through tonight's Damian Priest, our truth segment, I mean, that is not happening. And I think like it's generally a hands-off approach. But of course, they're going to have influence when there is something that serves a greater business vision for them.
Do you believe, though, that it certainly seems that Pat McAfee thought he was done with WWE for the foreseeable future as a couple months ago, and he did not think that he was going to be at WrestleMania, and then he was. I mean, it seems like that was that. Do you believe that that's an Ari Emanuel intervention?
That's my understanding of it. It's like what I was told was that they had an idea for Pat McAfee a couple of weeks before WrestleMania, and he was going to show up on a Raw, which was in Boston a couple of weeks ago. That show came and went. He was not on that show. And then I was told, like, the McAfee thing is done. And they were coming up with new ideas of who would be Randy Orton's partner. And then all of a sudden, McAfee returned on that SmackDown on April 3rd. So something happened in there, and they got him back on board. But it seemed as though, and now it looks as though this is completely off the table, despite them kind of setting it for more to go beyond WrestleMania. Because if ever there was like just a absolute pulling of the plug of an angle, that is what you got over the weekend with Pat McAfee. Like, they ended the Orton thing. He's off. And while I don't doubt he will be on WWE programming at some point, like, it does feel as though he has taken himself out of this. But it's like Ari is, very much promoting Pat McAfee. And I do feel like this was, a choice made by TKO of having, and on the surface, like, it does make sense that you have this relationship with ESPN and you've got Pat McAfee to utilize. It's the way in which it was done that just universally turned many, many people off.
And we do have an article. I just Googled Pat McAfee agent, and the first result that comes up is a New York Post article that says Pat McAfee hires super agent, referring to Ari Emanuel, to help him land TV and movie roles in Hollywood, according to, I guess they're aggregating Bloomberg there. So Ari Emanuel is literally his agent, according to New York Post, according to Bloomberg. I thought it was notable. Now, you can correct me if I'm wrong, because you saw the complete WrestleMania broadcast. I did not. Did Paul Levesque make an appearance and ask everybody if they are ready?
I was waiting all night because I was ready and I had no one to inform I was by Paul Levesque. So we amazingly did not see him on either night of WrestleMania.
Just a coincidence? You think that's meaningful?
I found it, I didn't think too much into it, but it is kind of interesting when Paul is sort of like the stamp on all of these big WWE events. He is the star of Unreal.
I think it did happen the last two WrestleManias, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, the one we were at a few years ago in Philadelphia, like, that was basically that was the launch of the Paul Levesque era, as they promoted and hit us over the head with all weekend long.
And he's been well remembered for starting off the NXT takeovers in his era of NXT in a similar way. What am I wrong? Did he do any post-show interview as part of their post-show broadcast?
He was not on either of the post shows. Now, I understand, I believe after night 2, he did appear on ESPN and was interviewed, but not on the WWE post show, as I understand it. So, a subdued Paul Levesque over the weekend. Final notes here, and then we will get out of here. Warner Brothers shareholders, they've approved the Paramount Skydance merger, so it is now one step closer to completion, and then everyone's heads will explode. And Triller has discontinued AEW Plus. It will no longer offer AEW pay-per-views on the platform. This coming shortly after the launch of My AEW, which seemed to be a precursor to this arrangement dissolving, which these two have partnered since the infancy of AEW, right at the start in 2019. And Wrestling Revolver is also the latest company. They have taken their shows off of Triller and are moving exclusively to YouTube. It would seem that Triller, I mean, they still have... they have Progress Wrestling shows. They, of course, have Game Changer Wrestling. But Triller is, I don't know. I don't know where Triller is heading. But the wrestling space, it is becoming less populated, even though it had like a big presence carrying all the collective shows over the weekend for Mania.
There was at the same time that the proxy statement for TKO dropped, there was an 8K file, which means something important happened that we have to tell you about from Triller. notice of delisting or failure to satisfy a continued listing rule or standard. I'm not going to try to understand what that means right now, but they're still having their financial reporting struggles, it appears.
Well,
this, of course, is the parent company of the thing that we're really talking about, which is Triller TV. Triller is this larger, I don't know if you call it holding group, but larger parent company.
Super chats here. First one here. Updated thoughts on AEW running Saudi Mania week next year. I'm surprised that they're going there in June for Night of Champions. Piff getting out of sport. Interesting. I mean, they're getting out of LIV Golf. I mean, it is not extended beyond that, but I don't think it would be crazy to think that there's going to be other sort of pulling back of funding in various areas that they have money. Remember, they've got a World Cup coming up. Like, they have a lot of investments across many sports that they are involved in now. But looking ahead to a year, is there an opportunity? This is continuing to be brought up, and many people questioning over the past week, like, what will WrestleMania week look like next year, assuming WWE is in Saudi Arabia for those shows.
Yeah, I don't think you do it during WrestleMania. Whenever I know the report is that maybe it's, I think it's from Fightful, maybe it's in late March next year, but I wouldn't do it at the same time or the same weekend. But I think huge branding opportunity for AEW, and maybe it's always tough to get competing interests to cooperate, but maybe cooperate with some of the indies, because clearly, the collective and WrestleCon would want to do. Would want to have their annual big week of business, and I don't think they're going to do it in Riyadh.
Do you think AEW could sustain like a stadium level event in the U.S.?
Sure. What do you mean by sustain? Like, do one? Yeah, but like do one in addition to All In every year? No.
For next year, like, you build this as this big wrestling gathering of all your independent shows and build it.
Yeah, I wouldn't shoot too high. You'd want it to be in New Orleans, so maybe do it in the Superdome. But ideally, I think baseball stadium. You don't want to overplay your hand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's I think it would largely be contingent on if this thing took on a life of its own. Like, this became something where it just becomes this big destination for wrestling fans, that this is our counter to, I would not run WrestleMania week. I would want my own weekend, and you make it as amenable for fans as possible and really go out of your way. But to me, it would have to take on more than just, it's a big AEW show. It would need to have the feeling of something historically significant for fans to want to be at.
And the winds are blowing in the right direction, right? In terms of that discontent around WWE and TKO because of myriad reasons. The ESPN authentication issue, especially the ticket prices. You got a small group of fans, but enough that it was audible on television chanting FTKO. We've seen the sentiment. If you believe my sentiment, data analysis is valid. That sentiment is driving with AEW up and WWE back down. The winds are blowing in the right direction to really execute on that. Can you execute on it? That's a different matter.
And Jake from the Windy City. Luke Thomas touched on the Andreas Hale WWE ordeal today and said it best. If you work in corporate media, your outlet will not save you. It's the new normal. Well, it's seems unfortunate in this case, but it's
that's why it's important to support independent media such as Post Wrestling and WrestleNomics.
That is right, folks. PostWrestlingCafe.com, Patreon.com/WrestleNomics. That is where you can find all of our work, and we are here every Thursday night, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time on the WrestleNomics and Post Wrestling channels. Do yourself a favor, check out both sites. Brandon has been doing exceptional work alongside Jason Upensar as well, who's been a contributor.
He taught me it's Unpressor.
Upensar. Okay.
I think it's Unpressor. He gave it to me in phonetics once, so he can correct.
You need to send that to me. If the hardcores will notice, I've been a little hesitant to try it out until now.
Yes.
So
this is why I'm teaching you now.
Yes.
Jason,
so I will need the phonetic spelling, but he does phenomenal work alongside Brandon and the whole team at Post Wrestling. So we're going to sign off. Thanks to everybody for checking out the show. We're back next week.